How you doing? I'm just going to quickly check to see if it's both. It should be. You guys comment if we are live. You should be. And obviously, we'll get speaking about something relative to what's just happened recently, or what's been happening recently. And it's relative to do with the Chinese Communist Party, and it seems like it could potentially be that Xi may not continue, and my friend Mike will certainly give you any update that's happened of recent. So that's just one of those things. So what have you got to say on the particular issue of what's been going on at the moment?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me again. And what happened is that we have seen something very strange, excuse me, developed since May. Well, I mean, the first sign that we see she is in trouble is that she's books, he allegedly write a lot of them, is being kind of like being moved away from the official CCP bookstores, online bookstores. Now, I'm not the person who discovered that. I must say that, okay. And a friend of mine told me that. I say, look, perhaps in the future, retrospectively, we could say that this could be the beginning of the end of Xi. But I said that we definitely need more indicators. I mean, before we can like judge exactly what is going on.
Mm.
And so I said that we have to wait and see. And then I remember that I believe in May. I mean, the political meeting. What happened is that usually, this type of meetings have a standard format where after they have a press release, something similar like that, or the People's Daily, the propaganda arm of the newspaper of the CCP. They said that wow, they have something. They have a standard format, basically saying that she has called a political meeting, okay, and then the political group discussed blah 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 blah, a bunch of stuff, okay. And then she concludes that certain things has to be done, something like that, okay. Suddenly, that format changed. The first two parts are the same, okay. The final paragraph is changed from she concludes that become the political bureau concludes that. Now that is a huge indication. Now you may ask, well, I mean, only a sentence or phrase. What is the change? Now the clear indication is that usually, if she is in power, they would not going to say things like that. Basically, it's a way to demonstrate that he's still in power. When you have things like subtle changes like that indicate that he's losing the power grip. A very good example will be Field Marshal Lin Biao. Lin was his surname. I mean, he was supposed to be the second handpicked successor by Mao, not until he was losing the power struggle and then flee, and later being shot down. Now, it was supposed to be, now, it depends on who you believe. Now, there's rumors suggest that his plane was shot down by missiles, according to Mao's authorization.
Mm-hmm.
Some people suggested that actually it was a purely aircraft accident, really. And someone argued that even for those who arguing that it is a missile attack, some people argue that whether this missile was hitting them within the PRC area airspace or in the Mongolia airspace, because if it does hit it in Mongolia airspace, technically it's an invasion of a foreign airspace. It could be declaration of war in that sense. But anyway, what happened is that they didn't announce the results immediately. Instead, he was died in 1971. It was only announced in 1973. But Deng Xiaoping's wife, his wife famously said that when he noticed one thing had changed, before Mao was saying that Mao is now welcoming a foreign guest, accompanied by Field Marshal Lin Biao. Suddenly, that accompanied by Field Marshal Lin Biao phrase is gone. And then Deng Xiaoping's wife famously said that, tell the old man, that's his husband, Lin Biao is out of power now. Now, what they don't know that he's dead, okay? But this is the internal indications that we're seeing that. So she is absolutely in trouble in terms of controlling the power. Then we start to seeing other things is moving on. For example, we noticed that the current Prime Minister Li Keqiang, Li is his surname, He is having organized 100,000 official meetings, a convention, to basically arguing that, instead of she have a famous zero COVID strategy on this matter. He argues there should be a living together, economy first strategy. That is a clear discrepancy. I mean, you don't corner 100,000 officials to have things like that. This is a clear power struggle between both sides. Basically, it is to make them extremely obvious. Just to give one point for those who not very understand the CCP situation, Mao famously said that CCP has no powers in fight. There is only policy and doctrines in fight. So all the power struggle have to be fight on doctrines and policies. Now there's a very clear two policies in between. One is the zero-K strategies, okay? That's advocated by Xi. Another will be clearly, this is on the anti-Xi side, is the living together, economy first strategies, which is basically well, I do not want to say that it is led by Li, the Prime Minister Li, because he is not lead technically. He is the person who has been asked to be the representative, shall we say, in this way. He's not leading the campaign because it's the NDCs of different factions is pushing this forward, and he's being pushed as the representative of them in that sense. So he's technically speaking leading. That is the situation, and we even see some very strange things happening. For example, like we noticed one of Xi's close ally, the Deputy Foreign Secretary, Le Yucheng, Le is his surname. He's a very famously known Russophile. Is how you say the people who is absolutely non-Russia. And he's out as Deputy Foreign Secretary. I mean, this is a huge indication because we all know that before the Russia-Ukraine war happened, the PRC has, and to be specific, Xi has given a huge strong signal on this matter that he's backing Putin. I believe we can all agree on this matter. And,
I wouldn't be surprised by that. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that relative to that whole thing with and I even argued this before when it came to the war with regards to Russia, Ukraine, and I even mentioned that I don't trust either side. Obviously the side relative to do with Ukraine, people were, so supportive of it, but, from what people have been saying that they had been attacking that of people in the east of Ukraine. Even then, it was a case that, it's the fact that you've got all these globalists that are, backing Ukraine. It looked very suspicious, but at the same time, it's not one of those situations where I would say, there's one side that you could, favour, because even then you had, Vladimir Putin. He's hardly somebody you could even, hold trust. And it was the very fact that it was the position where he himself kind of wanted to create like this Eurasian sort of union, and that's why it really didn't surprise me that Xi would end up favouring that to do with, Putin's side.
Well, in my perspective, what happened is it is a purely geopolitical gameplay, really. In my perspective, I agree with you. Ukraine has its problems. I mean, I would say that Ukraine has its problem. Doesn't mean that Putin has justified the invasion. This is my position, and I believing that it's a purely calculation of Putin to believing that he could take over Ukraine right away, or at least the east above Ukraine. But I believe he has overestimated the whole situation, and this actually is quite damaging, which leads to the point that why suddenly the anti-Xi factions have the guts to do something. Because I do not know whether you might be aware there's America as part of the called access law. Basically, it's an act that will allow the American government, to specifically investigate how much Xi is involved on this Russia-Ukraine situation. And this is a huge triggering point for all these anti-Xi movements, because they knew that what are the financial rules and the sanctions that have been subjected by Russia and their politicians, and they're very concerned, clearly in my perspective, that if they have received such a sanctions on their side, I mean, let's face it, could they have put quite a lot of money outside them? All this corruption money is basically outside outside other different areas, for example, like the US or in Europe or Switzerland, whatever the countries it is. That become a huge problem, for them, and that is the triggering point, because they believing in my perspective, that if they can get rid of Xi, because the law is the actors of the American actors basically are directly targeting towards Xi. So they believing that, in my perspective, that by getting rid of Xi, they can have a quickly resolve this matter. And this also become a problem, because you see, because of that, if they are going to pushing for back to Deng Xiaoping's policy, it will become very problematic for Russia as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not many people actually know that Russia is but Deng Xiaoping is a very, very well-known Russian skeptic within the CCP.
Right, I see.
Yes, he famously said that, CCP can only shake hands with Russia, but never hug. So if the Russian skeptic faction of the CCP did get back to the power, I mean, that could be very damaging for
the relations between China and Russia, you're saying? Pretty much.
Yes.
Yep.
And also, that could have a huge security implication for Russia as well. Because in one sense, you can even argue that Deng Xiaoping is an American file. So if his policy is a big assumption, if he does, that if she is out of power and the Deng Xiaoping's old policy has been revived in that sense, that means that the Americans or the NATO's, the whole Western free world, will join the PRC to defeat Russia again, just like what they did in the 1980s. There's a huge international policy implications on this matter. That's why, in my perspective, you see Putin start to soften up some of his positions. For example, like he said, I don't mind that, that two Nordic countries will join the NATO. He used to be very tough on this matter. When he said that, he would say, no, this is wrong. Like Finland, they say, no, this is wrong, and then they will send troops over there right away. He surprisingly softened, because I believe he sensed the problem. I believe that he noticed that. I would even go on to argue that both Russia and the PRC is trying to raising to see who is going to get on with the West first, because whoever gets to the West first, who will be basically get into the situation to completely finish the other side.
Somewhat as this well, just before it, obviously, Stephen had mentioned, obviously, the Chinese Communist Party, saying, also known as the SNP. SNP is certainly thingy. But as this had mentioned, China, India, Russia working together more could really create a powerhouse alliance in the East. Well, I suppose, if that was the case where there is such a strong alliance, but I mean, from what you're explaining, Mike, it sounds like there's a certain divide, like depending, if she's removed as such a faction, that's obviously the opposition to Xi would be very Russia skeptic, as you're saying.
Yes, is what I'm saying, and plus, these three countries have a huge conflict of interest as well. For example, like we know that, which Scott, you mentioned that Eurasia point, and I absolutely agree with you on this point, because Eurasia point, PRC is standing as one of the obstacles of the Eurasia Union or country, whatever you will describe them. Okay. And Russia has a long history to invade or attack China, Imperial China, the Republic of China, whatever time that you want to say China it is, okay, take a look at the history.
Yeah.
And China have, historically, no matter it's PRC, whatever that it is, has a huge conflict within India as well. So these three countries, they have so much conflicts, and back to the history to the point, that it is impossible, in that sense, to have a coherent alliances.
I can see what you mean. Obviously, the conflicts of interest. I can see why, in that regard, why it would be problematic in that sense. It's one of these things that Russia in the past, I've noticed that there has been conflict with China. I don't, in particular, with relative to the history between India and China. I couldn't really tell you the history on that in particular.
Oh, the conflicts have been on the border, like the Tibet and the Indian border, has been like for the more than a century now.
Okay.
I mean, it's stuff from the Imperial Chinese Imperial Qing dynasty of China. I mean that is quite a long while now. I mean, it is an ongoing situation that has almost never stopped. If I'm being quite honest with you, you know. So it is a situation, and now even some people will argue that. Now, of course, I must say this is a very very small proportion of people. They will within India that they will argue Tibet is the so-called Greater Indian territory. But I have to say very clearly, this is a very very small part of people, very very marginal. They've been marginalized, but I just want to highlight that the conflict of objectives of different people. This is the problem that we are having here. That's why these alliances can never materialize in the first place. And plus, Pakistan and India itself is already a problem itself, because PRC has have a very close relationship with Pakistan, but Pakistan have many problems with India. So we're going to do that. I mean, it is something that is just simply chaotic, absolutely chaotic in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why.
That's actually, it's the same reason for, when it came to the European Union, which, let's face it, wasn't, it didn't come around through some democratic process, and it didn't really come about through, people. It was like through the back door almost, and even within the European Union, you can see there's conflict of interest between many of the southern European countries to that of, in the north. And there is a growing divide, and there's more countries that want to break away from it. And that, to me, that would be no different if it was the case with regards to a Eurasian Union. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, of course, no question about that. The problem that we are having here is that we are, how do you say, they have overestimated their situation, because, for example, they if they talk about like a strengthening free trade zone, like something like similar to WTO, or a bigger version of WTO, or more flexible version than WTO, you understand what I mean? Actually, this could be a possible option, you understand what I mean? But once they start to do other things like controlling your regulations, what you can do, what you cannot do, Eurozone, I mean, this is finished. And you had a very good point about the Southern European countries, because there's a problem that ongoing, because first of all, I mean, after the Euro crisis in 2009, and basically the ECB printed a lot of money, or a hell of a lot of money. It would be a better way to describe that. And most of them are funded into southern, so-called the PIGS countries. The southern European countries are in trouble. The trouble is that this make a lot of countries unhappy, because they said that, one, why would bail them? Two, I mean, you print a lot of money. Why I do not deserve to have some? Because that is also the same argument that why I call the Eurozone collective, like the Eurobond, there's Eurozone bond, collectively is never possible, because you can never have a proper way to allocate the money. Now, for example, those southern countries are going to say that, look, it should be depends on how worse the economy that it is to allocate the money, right? In their perspective, of course it is, However, countries like France will say that, look, it should be depends on how much contribution that we pay to the EU, because they are paying more, right? The some countries paying less, right? And the so-called prudent four, we're going to say that, like Austria, and Netherlands, and they will say that, look, well, we didn't create this mess. We shouldn't. Why have to pay up your interest and all this lot of things? You know what I mean? And you have Germany who said, look, basically you're swiping my credit card, really, so you lot have to listen to what I've said. That's why the whole fiscal doctrines, they have to go to either way. They either have to be controlled by one single individual, which is Germany, or they have to be completely collapsed. But it is basically, it is tearing in the pieces. I believe they're going through the complete collapse. If they actually just only, as I expected, if they are advocating for a better WTO, or a freer, like both a service and goods a WTO version with a better addition, actually it could work in that sense. You understand what I mean? Like the EEC. But of course we know this is not the case, So that's why it is become a power transfer from the different democratic institutions towards the bureaucracy, and that's what we're seeing right now.
As commented by, again, as this comments, strengthening of relationships will take time, perhaps. I suppose typically what you tend to find with relationships, though, is it's one of these things that you only have to look at, history in general, and typically what you end up finding is one of these things that, depending on where the economy goes, depending how an economy performs, that's the very reason why when you saw the Weimar Republic collapse and you saw economic strife, it created this sort of envy, and then on top of that you had, protectionist tariffs and all the rest of it. So that ended up sparking what was the National Socialism of Nazi Germany. And just that small example is exactly what I mean in terms of what it could end up leading to. And it's the same, with the collapse of the European Union. When it eventually comes around, because of the greater divisions and the rise of these nationalist movements in the south, just because of where the economies are going, it'll create that nationalist, how do you put it? So they'll seek revenge, and I'm not going to go as far as to say, countries will go to war, but history has a very turbulent thing where you never know. But I mean, these countries could potentially, maybe the relations, could build. I suppose it really depends on where things go, as such. But I mean, it's unpredictable in that sense. As this it goes on to say, China, India buying Russian oil at discount right now is probably very early step to further business activity. That's a reasonable point. I mean, obviously, trade is one of these things.
Yes, trade, of course, one of these things. But I will say this point very carefully. I mean, you buy a discounted rate of oil doesn't mean that, one, you can able to benefit them. Two, you can able to use them. I mean, for example, like the current manufacturing output in the PRC is miserable, to say at least. I mean, what are going to use this oil for then? Genuine question. They reached the point that they have to run their factory in empty places so that they use some of the electricity. What way are you going to use them? I mean, you see, the problem is that because of Xi's zero-case strategies, this actually killed the whole thing. Because they have no manufacturing. I mean, you have 0 cases. You have to lock down all the things. How are you going to, these people going to go to manufacturing? I mean, let's put all these tariffs or all these things aside, okay, for the sake of argument. Let's assume that they're cancelled immediately. You do not have the workforce to back to the work. No one talk about that,
Yeah, I couldn't really, for me specifically, I couldn't really tell you what's going on in China at the moment relative to their manufacturing, etc. I mean, but I can see your own point.
That's why I say this is the whole thing is that even though you get the cheap oil, is no use in my perspective. And plus, India, yes, they did buy a lot of cheap oil, but the question is that, first of all, it doesn't resolve the China-India situation. Two, we know that India is well known of having a close relationship with Russia before, but that doesn't mean that it will be able to translate this relationship with China, and it doesn't mean that these three parts can sit together. That is something that worth to highlight.
Yeah, I can understand. I know typically you do find trade can help in some sense or whatever. Like if there's free trade and both countries benefit in relations and stuff, it can help, but there might be more to it than that. That causes conflict. Who knows?
Historical conflict is always a problem. I mean, especially for PRs, they drum up all this nationalist stuff these days. I mean, that it is quite difficult for them to back down, unless there's a change of new leader. I mean, that's the problem that the PRs have to face, because you cannot just simply change everything. Because it's kind of like they create their own trap in one sense.
Nihilism says, can sanction India as harshly as Iran. It doesn't have the capacity for self-sufficiency. And then just quickly, as this says, the G7 also very recently banned sanctioned Russian gold exports. Another possible entry point for discounted supply for China and India.
Well, to be honest, I never believing that sanctions on ban of oil and precious metals work. The problem is that even precious metals, they can just melt it and then go away. Oil can technically still can be like have some chemical patterns to identify where they come from, because usually what type of oil they are from. But it's very difficult. But the Russia oil is not going well. I mean, their price difference, the gap between the Russian, I forgot which city they are, and the Brent is quite large, and there's no indication they're going to smaller the gap. So it's not going well at the moment for Russia. And also, this war has a very strange implications, because I want to highlight that, because I believe one of the reasons that why the NATO and the West decided, in my perspective, ultimately the PRC will win the race in order to get the West again, to defeat Russia, is because they realize Russia is not as strong as it's claimed. For example, the sinking of Moscow is a disaster in my perspective. I mean, it's supposed to be the flagship of the Black Sea, and which supposed to have all the latest defense equipments.
No, they're not. It's one of these. It's one of these countries that all these sort of nationalists, these sort of protectionists, and that, they bomb up Russia to be more than what it actually is. But the reality is, of Russia, they're not actually this rich country. Russia. If you were to put it into perspective, I think they spent something like 40 odd, was it trillion or a billion? I can't remember what the figure was. It was in an article that I had read. They had spent about 40 odd in total. I think it was like billion or something in defence, right? But when you look at just 3 countries alone within, obviously Europe relative to Britain, I think it was Germany was the other, and I think France. I can't specifically remember. Britain was obviously one of them. I think Germany was the other. If you were to put those 3 countries alone, we had spent like 120 odd billion in defence. So we already dwarf that of Russia in terms of defence spending. I'm not exactly,
Well, just sorry to interrupt one point. It is spending is very important, but quality and quantity is both important in that. Just to one point to interrupt really.
True. And the other point was the fact that if you were to look at the United States spends 7 times that. Now, I'm not saying the spending is exactly ideal, because you know my position on all of that type of stuff.
Yes, and don't forget the black budget, by the way.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I mean. Russia is hardly, in other words, how Russia's spending at the moment, they're not spending within their means. They're going over their capacity, and that's at 40 billion. So they're hardly this great, big, massive threat. Yeah, in terms of their nuclear, there's no denying that. But in terms of, the firepower, they're actually forcing the country. If they were to, in other words, what the article was saying is, if Russia was to overspend beyond that, they would be pushing their country into subsistence levels, which would mean that people would be left to starve and all sorts. Right. So
well, basically, the good old question, because in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan sends a Star War. Basically, it's a Star War that basically stimulated the Soviet Union. They said, oh my God, You know, we got to do something, and they do something, and they bankrupt themselves in that sense.
Yeah.
You understand why? I mean, basically, that's the point.
Yeah. So back to obviously your own point.
Yes, and because of that, that's a huge implication because not many people should notice that the Eastern Fleet of the PRC actually are all equipped with the same system. Now, of course, the Ukrainians claim that they have done this kind of things. I mean, this is total nonsense. It's absolutely have the help of NATO. You honestly believe that Ukraine have the capability to do it? Seriously. What happened is that I believe that NATO used their intelligence and capabilities to notice that they're there. They interfere the system using cyber skills, cyber technology, and to allow the Ukraine to use a 1960 rockets, which is a Soviet type of rocket, to destroy that latest technology. This also have a huge implication of Taiwan ROC because of the PRC's Eastern Fleet are all equipped with this type of thing. So the ROC Taiwan side can use the same strategy to defeat all this kind of Eastern Fleet ships if they do have at one point to arrive. That's why this will even make the PRA, the People's Liberation Army from the PRC, even more think twice, or think many times more before they do push for the invasion. Of course, we know she definitely want to push it, but I don't believe in that he will have a chance to do it because most of the senior PRA people, they know that Taiwan is not this too tough to crack. But that doesn't mean that PRC is not an enemy of the Taiwan. I make myself very clear about that. What I'm saying is that the threat is not imminent, but we have to keep. And the way that we can make sure this is not imminent is to keep arm Taiwan to the teeth. That will be the way that I'm saying, and that's my point.
So what will make you believe that in terms of the current situation relative to Xi, obviously, do you think that he could be potentially removed? The Chinese, the Chinese Communist Party's like, it's kind of...
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I would say the current situation, he's damaged, significantly damaged, but not ousted. He will try his best to push on, his cling on, or even trying to appoint his own successor to try to get the power. It will be very ugly. I believe he should be able to oust it, but it's not ousted as easy as most of people think of. Because if you take a look at the current situation, there are quite a lot of other commentators who will argue that because of the indications that I propose, or I suggest, or I can talk about later, that she has been paralyzed in terms of power rise. I said no. If he is ousted already, he would have been announced that he's ousted in that sense. Because there is a very famous, the Cryan Hall incident. That is basically Mao's handpicked third successor and joined hands with Deng Xiaoping to marginalize Mao's fourth wife, the First Lady, because the First Lady is leading another Maoist faction called Gang of Four, and to control the Cultural Revolution. So these two people joined hands together to use a PLA to completely destroy the Gang of Four by arresting them in the Ryan Hall. That's why it's called Ryan Hall incident. After that, the CCP already immediately announced that the Mao's handpicked successor, suddenly forget his name, the Hua Guofeng, Hua was his surname, the third one, and the final one finally get the power briefly, had become the general secretary and the chairman of the party. So that is what they are going to do. If this happened, it already announced, you understand what I mean? So I would say that the power struggle continues. She should be able to oust, but it will not be easy. It will be very ugly, It will be as ugly as what we're seeing now down in Westminster. Okay, it won't be less ugly, probably even more uglier than that. She will be dragged out from office, and this fight will until 2013 spring, until the National People's Congress has been called.
Aaron Smith asks you, hey Mike, he says, great to see you on again. Do you think China will be able to print money for as long as American is indebted to them? Sorry for the leading questions.
Well, Aaron, long time no see. Yes, it's been a while that I come back to the channel, and well, once again, forgot to first of all thank Scott to let me to be back to his channel. That's very important, you know. You didn't deploy on me. I want to make myself clear about that. Scott never deployed on me. Okay, it's I didn't get the chance to do it. So to clarify the point, yeah, first of all, okay. Very good question. Very good question. The PRC has reached to a point that they can no longer print that much money. This is actually one of the key questions that the NDC and the Cs is fighting, because the NDC side, which is kind of like you can argue that less a socialist type of things, they realize the problem of keep printing money. Because, for example, like some of them even off the record, you know, they're briefing some of the people outside to suggest that they realize that previously they print too much money. They actually admit that, you know, and that's why you have inflated everything. You have assets, you have properties, or whatever that is to keep inflating. And they said that they will have to reach a dilemma to a point that the money and the liquidity get into the market, but they are not. I mean, they have liquidity trap, classic liquidity trap. They are either in the bank but unable to let it out, or they let it out finally, but they have a problem right now because you have all the lockdown things, right? So all the economic activities stop in that sense, you know. It becomes hugely problematic now. If they keep printing money, you know, the renminbi, that is the PRC's currencies, will keep falling, okay? Because we know that the dollar is not, the US dollars is, they're raising interest rates, so of course our dollar assets will go to push for that side, you know. Naturally understanding you want more interest rate, right? You want interest, right? So they will get up, but the renminbi keep dropping, and the problem that they're having is that because you remember the lockdown, right? These lockdowns actually make manufacturers go bust because they can't do anything, you know.
Yeah, they
cannot just seem
inactive.
They can't do anything, so they go bust. And most of these small factories, you know, they get their money from small rural or medium-sized of banks, or banking societies or credit like that we have, you know. And these small banks is a huge ticking time bomb. I have to stress this very carefully on this matter, because we have already started seeing SMEs banks, not SMEs, small rural banks go bust. Because these type of banks, what they usually do, they usually borrow money from the major banks or the central bank itself and to lend the money out. But because of these small businesses, for small factories or like whatever it is, they are running out. They don't have business. Okay, let's face it. I mean, because of lockdown, and as a result, they go bust. Then all this loan that is getting out, you know, become bad debt. Then these banks become problem, and they start going bust. I mean, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Bear in mind that these are small banks, and we haven't talked about insurance companies. Bear in mind that insurance companies also actively participate in this market, you know. And plus, if this go ahead from small banks, this could lead to even more major problems, because remember what I said, they usually come from not depositors, but from major banks or the central bank, usually the major banks. That means that it will like the domino effect. It is if I were going to say that if the PRC does not kickstart their manufacturing engines now, for the sake of argument, assume they get contracts, you know. Whether they can get contracts is another big question mark, you know, because of all these situations over in NATO and the Western side and accusing a lot of stuff, you know, and the tariffs, you know. For the sake of argument, let's put them aside, and only to say that it is possible to get contracts done, okay? If they do not kickstart within the next season, there will be a gigantic financial crisis coming from the PRC side.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day,
it's a man-big one, by the way.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's one of these things that's, as you're saying there, Mike, it's a global crisis that's going on, and I think a large part of it is engineered, and it has been for decades. Let's face it, these globalists, those part of the likes of the World Economic Forum, it's been well documented. It's not something of a conspiracy theory. They've been wanting this new world order. They've been wanting this one world government with a one world currency. And funny enough, the World Economic Forum more recently had come out and they started speaking about this, you know, digital centralized currency, something kind of like a cryptocurrency, but something more centralized, so that they can read every single transaction that you make, right? I mean, this is exactly what they kind of want. and they're the ones that have been controlling the entire system. They're the ones that have been, the governments are more or less bought and paid for, right? It's corporatocracy, but they've been wanting this all along, where they want to, collapse your currencies and then force us onto this, digital centralised currency, so that we're all controlled under one government. We'll probably still have our own governments, but it'll be kind of like just for the sake of face value.
Just like the EU, how EU operated it is, shall we say it this way?
Correctly, I mean that's essentially the way it looks, and with it being a global crisis, it's like let's face it. I mean, the currencies are not going to last long, and it's just like with the dollar. As soon as the lockdowns came around, I mean, this problem's been long gone. Long before that of the pandemics and stuff like that. Because after all, how do you think they were, bailing out the banks? Where do you think all the money's been coming from? Well, if you look at the M2 and M1 money supply, you see from the graph that it's soared. I don't even know if I've got an.
Just take a look at. Let's take a look at the balance sheet side. Just to simplify the things, you don't talk about M1, M2 because some of the people might understand what M1, M2 is.
I'll quickly just show. I think it's just this one graph. I'll just quickly show. The hard drive's gone, but it's basically the M2 money supply is basically the quantity of money that's been printed in supply of the economy. In other words, it's just basically a gauge to show you the more and more money they've been printing, the more the graph will obviously show for that.
Which of course.
You can see there from the graph, that's the United States of America, and where you can see round about 2020 there, you can see there's been a sharp spike. It was already bad enough as it was before that, but you can see there that the 2020 pandemic just made it, a lot worse. It's made a sharp incline, and that's essentially with regards to the current monetary supply, and it's the same in the United Kingdom. It was inevitable that if you lock down the economy and a lot of private businesses are closed down, where do you think the money was coming from to furlough all those closed down temporarily private businesses? Well, the bottom line was they were furloughing them off the back of new created printed currency.
That is the situation right now. We have high inflation because you cannot. We're printing money. Well, someone will probably recall I always said that we are approaching the full employment, which we are approaching. I would say that we are approaching the full employment in the most bizarre way. Then the increase rate of the currency will go directly to the proportion that we are having in the inflation. We're exactly having things like that. We are approaching the one full employment is most bizarre approach because full employment again remind all our audience do not know what that is. It means that no structural employment, no poverty, no one is sacked. Those who are not working, simply they do not seek to work. This is exactly what we're having because now we are post-pandemic, we are endemic phase. However, we're still struggling to recruiting people for example, if you are ill or sick, and sometimes they just do not want to get back to the job. So we are having indeed a approach for employment situation. The bizarre thing is that if we're phrasing out these things, I mean, once we are leaving the full employment, we could be actually seeing the inflation rate go down. Obviously, another way would be raise the interest rate at the moment, but I believing that if we're going to raise the interest rate, which we are going to have to raise, and I expect we're going to have a recession very shortly, this might be the only chance that we're going to do it because we cannot afford to let the inflation become a runaway train. I'm sure we can all agree on this matter. Just in
relation to what you said there, I mean, because obviously a recession soon, look out, I just asked the question quickly. Hey Scotty, hey Mike, which nation do you think will go into recession first, Canada, UK or the USA? And for me personally, it's quite difficult to say, but you look at both the United States and Britain alone, and I would imagine, because I don't know too much about Canada other than the fact that it's led by much like that of, the SNP with kind of like Nicola Sturgeon. It's led by some illiberal. sad to say.
They are in a coalition with those who understand Canadian politics do correct me. I believe the NDP has become like the Corbyn-like party.
Yeah, I mean,
correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have the Liberal Party, basically is the collectivist side, and because they are unable to resolve the deadlock, so that is the thing, and it is quite a sad situation because.
So it's just like you're saying relative to obviously China. The current situation with regards to them and the lockdowns and everything, I would imagine things are a lot worse.
They are very worse because just to clarify the point, I mean their situation is worse. I mean, current Prime Minister Li Keqiang, he famously said that he do not believing in the PRC official numbers. Economic numbers. He said that when he was a professional party leader, basically like the governor, the real governor in China on professional level is the professional party leader. Okay, he said that he only focused on 3 items to see what it is: the growth of the bank credit, to lend out the money, the electricity usage, and the railway freight usage, railway cargo usage. And if you base on these 3 indicators that Prime Minister Li has used in the past, it is a disaster. Absolutely disaster. Catastrophic.
There's the question Aaron asks. He says, would a global cryptocurrency prevent governments from propping up their own expenditure by printing their own currencies? Well, the whole purpose of a cryptocurrency was that it's decentralized. It's supposed to be something that government couldn't really touch. People were arguing, that would be, although they didn't call it, basically what a free market in money is basically money that the market itself determines what money is, not government. And what was so revolutionary about the idea of cryptocurrency, and I don't pretend to know, everything about it, because I don't. I've not even invested in it. But the whole idea behind cryptocurrency was that because it's decentralized, it can't be manipulated to the same extent. But then again, other people, again, with more knowledge and, of course, cryptocurrency stuff like that, says that it potentially can be. Nonetheless, with regards to the cryptocurrency, this is not quite what these globalists want, right? In other words, what these globalists are, they've probably taken influence from it, right? But what they're doing is they've created something that is centralized. What that simply means is it's the same idea with, a cryptocurrency, right? However, they will be able to read every single transaction you make. And what that means is they will also have the power to shut you off from spending at any time they feel like it. So that, you could, be spending one day and then next minute you find out your transaction's not working. Right? You're thinking to yourself,
sorry to interrupt you one point. This is exactly the problem most of us people are proposing. For example, like in the PRC, they propose to have a centralized blockchain. We all know the blockchain technology is about decentralizing, so they cannot be controlled, right?
Yep.
The problem is that the PRC, for example, they're proposing a cryptocurrency. They have a centralized blockchain. Now, I'm not sure whether countries. I know that, for example, like there are other countries proposing their own cryptocurrencies. But the question is not about. I'm sorry, I have to elaborate a bit more. It's about the cryptocurrency itself. First of all, are they centralized or decentralized? 1. 2, do they have a limit? I mean, bear in mind that cryptocurrencies, we all need to have a logarithm to do it. But is the logarithm, can it be changeable? Is it changeable? If it's not changeable, then how many can they produce? If they can produce a hell of a lot of them, so you can never stop them, it's meaningless. You understand what I mean? That's why Aaron, it should be Aaron, not Adam. Aaron has posed a very good question in this sense, and but no, I do not believe in a simple cryptocurrency will be able to solution, because what happened is that ultimately, even though you have a fixed amount of a crypto or whatever precious metal or whatever gold or whatever that it is, the question is that it will always lead to a point of because you have not used it, so we can have a fractional banking system or whatever that it is. What I would say that we have to. What I was going to say is that we have to agree on that whether the people will have the right to control the money supply. That will be the thing that I was going to say, because it is it's very simple. People cannot learn their mistakes unless they go through the things that, especially in currency, and unfortunately in this matter. And I would say that unless there is a very set mechanism, otherwise it will not work. But even if you have a sector mechanism, they will just base on that and then issue a bunch of debts. I owned you, notes. This is how it works. Just like how the SDR. I don't know whether you know that the SDR, special drawing rights, from the IMF. How they work? So they were supposed to pay gold. I owe you gold. And then later, because of the Nixon unpacked the gold and then become the special drawing rights, basically will become the allocation of how many that different countries would have, and that is the thing. So it is the case that it is. So I don't see a global cryptocurrency. We're going to stop the government from printing more money. I mean, that's human nature. Unfortunately, we can only for education. I mean, just like Friedman famously said,
Yeah, I think from my personal opinion on the particular situation on the paper currency, I think it will run its course in my personal opinion. But I think more and more people are becoming informed about the World Economic Forum, and I don't think people will take to that idea anyway with regards to a centralised digital crypto sort of currency. They'll not accept that because people value their privacy, and when they know that they'll be able to read every transaction, people will never accept that. You'll see riots everywhere. Christ, even right now, there was a video I watched on Instagram, and this was in the Netherlands, and farmers are out, protesting. They're on strike, and you see police firing at them and all sorts, and it's showing you that people are starting to go against all this, crap, right? People have had enough. These are just ordinary, hard-working people, and they've had enough. And I think it's reaching a sort of boiling point, so to speak. Obviously, it'll probably get a lot worse, but it's all because of this, inflation and everything. I mean, how do you expect people to get by? Well, it's the same thing when it comes to that whole, thing relative to some cryptocurrency. People are not just going to, roll over and accept it. I think these globalists seem to live in some deluded fantasy world where, they imagine that we'll just accept it. It's not going to be the case. You've seen what it's like with them trying to force the European Union on us. Didn't turn out too well, did it?
Doesn't work.
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
You can't force anything upon us, and it's quite interesting that, because where they got the influence from, and just as Mike was explaining there, where they actually got the influence from of that whole digital centralised currency, it's not just to do with the blockchain, it's to do with what they're doing in China. Because it's the whole point score and everything, where they read everything you're doing, all the transactions, all sorts. They actually took it influence from China.
And just speaking of this point, which I must point out, this is a red hot brand new news just announced a few days ago. We're talking about privacy. I do not know whether anyone, have this read this article from the Wall Street Journal. They reported that, which is true by the way, they reported that there is a billion of data has been stolen by hackers and being sold online. All they need is 20 bitcoins. 20 bitcoins is very cheap, not around $200,000 US. Now, I'm not saying that I process this money at the moment. I'm not saying that I do. What I'm saying is that if you are spending a billion of PRC citizens' data, which is, by the way, because it's verified true. Because what happened is that hacker basically give out 750,000 of them, and as a taser section, shall we say it this way, and they reporters call them and verify them, and they are all real data. And by the way, this data are not simple data. They are not only the name or email address or telephone numbers. That's simple. They even have border control status. For example, when you exit, when you enter, criminal records. Even some of them even have potentially have a bank transactions numbers. That is a disaster. I mean, this have a huge implication. I mean, this not only is basically, we know that this is not for money. I mean, let's face it, $200,000. If you have so much risk for that, for $1 billion data, it's very cheap, isn't it? It's quite clear it is not for economic reasons to get this thing done. I believe it's political reasons. This is very likely she is basically someone, the NDC side basically give a middle finger to Xi to say, look, we can control you and we will expose you. Because this data are very serious, because back then there was one of the demographics researchers in the PRC has conducted an in-depth demographic structure research like not a few years ago for around 250,000 populations to suggest that what is the demographic structure of PRC is. It was horrible. That's why he famously published a book called The Big Country with Empty Nest. Basically, he argues that the population is declining rapidly, will decline rapidly, not exactly, but will decline rapidly in PRC. That means that economic development and all of this will be like widening down,
Funny enough, I mean, just in relation, because China's the same way of just this question or statement I just had got. Voigt had went on to say, I think the World Economic Forum is deliberately becoming more visible to the public, drip into the public consciousness to prepare the public for the world government, same play as the EU. And it's a very interesting point because, they used a crisis to test the public, to see how subservient they are, to see how compliant they are. And this is what they do. They see how far they can push things, see how far that people just accept things. And that is a very interesting point, because I think that is the case. Why else then, during a pandemic, did they come out of nowhere and start preaching about, the virus knows no borders, and then started coming out with pish likes, the utter crap that they're spouting about, capitalism has ran its course. We don't even live under a capitalist system, but
I'm sorry to interrupt one point, because this has huge implications, because back to the point about the world economic thing, because this is a huge explosion of the PR's data has been exposed. All this data monitoring, it is a huge point, because it is kind of like proven that the PRs is monitoring people for a long time. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, they have been spying.
This data is the proof that they have been monitored. These people have been monitored. This is not only a wake-up call to prove that the PR is true, but it's a wake-up call for everyone that, look, if PR system has been adapted, social credit system has been adapted, what would happen? And plus, now of course, I'm quasi-academic myself, if I have the budget, I will buy all the data out. Why? This will be absolutely accurate primary research on this. Is the PRC claiming what they are claiming? She claimed that PRC have eliminated poverty, which his Prime Minister, Li Keqiang, said no. Of course, we all know this not. I mean, let's face it, how many poor people are there in the real mainland China? She's have talked about absolutely bollocks. Is that being banned on YouTube? I hope it's not being banned. I hope it's banned to the B word, okay? Okay, but he's talking nonsense. Okay, let me tone down a bit myself. Okay, I don't want to.
You're all right, my channel, mate. I mean, see all these other channels that censor themselves. I swear all the time.
Well, I'm afraid that you have been censored by YouTube. I don't want you to get striked by YouTube. You understand? You know what I mean? Okay, he is talking shite. She's talking shite. Eliminate poverty. You gotta be freaking kidding me, right? Take a look how many poor people in the rural areas in the mainland China. This is one of the biggest nonsense, BS, shite, blah blah blah, whatever you want to describe that. Okay, this will be if I have the money to put data mining on this matter, it will. But at the same time, we prove that China's PRs has keep monitoring these things, and they fail to do any protections on this matter. And of course, we know this is very likely from the anti-Xi movement leading out, because I don't know why you noticed. Where this data were usually stored on? It's stored on the Alibaba's cloud servers, and Alibaba is basically backed by the on paper it's controlled by Jack Ma, but we all know Jack Ma is just a proxy. It's basically backed by the people from the Shanghai faction, the Shanghai gang, which is part of the anti-Xi movement. That's what they engaged in. And plus, just have one more implications. This data is supposed to be accessed from the Shanghai Police Bureau. That is a huge implication. If a local city's police bureau can access them, does it mean that all other cities can access them?
So what change? Here's I suppose an interesting question with the current situation, obviously China, but what then? If for example Xi was, let's just say, removed, what change do you think you would see relative to China? What do you think would be brought around as a result? Do you think things would remain the same, or what sort of difference do you think you would see?
Now, first of all, I just want to clarify your question first. Do you mean that what are the indications that we're going to see Xi will be removed, or after Xi is removed, what are the new policies going to be in place? Yeah,
like what I mean is this. Let's say Xi was removed, right? Mm-hmm. And yes. Let's say that did happen.
Yep.
What do you think? How do you think things would go?
Now, first of all, I have to say that these are rumors. After I said rumors, I'm unable to verify that, okay?
Of course.
These are just anti-Xi side briefing out to different people to say what will happen. Prime Minister Li Keqiang promised he will push for one, small government, big market policies, limited government policies. Two, he promised that there will be democratic elections.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. That's a big difference.
That too will be a huge change, and the anti-Xi factions admit that because of Xi's brutal tactics on the ethnic minorities, it become almost impossible to repair the relationship between the ethnic minorities and Han Chinese, because I don't know whether you know there are different types of Chinese, including the Han race. You have 56 race, if I remember correctly, officially by the PRs categorized, and I'm a Han Chinese, full disclosure on this matter. Okay, when I say Chinese, I'm an ethnic Chinese, I'm ethnic Han Chinese. I consider myself a British Han Chinese, if I make myself clear on this matter. And these two will be limited government. I mean, a small government, a limited government, and a democratic elections. And Li can only run for one term anyway, because the 7 April down rule, he will just enough to be re-elected, because his 68th birthday will coming on 2023 July, and the National People's Council will hold in March, if not April, maximum May, so it'll be just enough before his 68th birthday to be elected one term. Obviously, you may ask, well, he talked about a lot. Can they deliver that? I wouldn't say this is impossible. There are glimpses of chances he could deliver that. For example, like last Chinese New Year, there was a video go viral in Weibo. That's his Chinese version Twitter. What happened is that there was a retired general who himself is a second generation, Crown Prince faction, second generation military people. His father was a very senior, used to be a senior military person in PLA. He have his 80th year-old birthday, party, He said a very quite bold speech. He said that he's an old man now, so he will not going to see many things. But he expect to see a major changes coming. And the people come and they start rose and they clap up, yeah, this is hooray. You know this kind of gathering, usually like senior officials, retired military generals,
Yeah.
Good at it. And they start clapping. And then he said that he has confidence he will see a democratic, constitutional country coming.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean,
it's a huge indication, and the people all clapping hands. They said that, And by the way, this guy, his retired general, has not been arrested. This video is being banned. That means that there is a huge support within the CCP system.
That's good to see that. I can understand where you're coming from, especially in that, because if it was the other way about, you'd be well censored. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It sounds like there's a strong support against Xi and his regime, which is obviously a positive thing. I think also because, and it was just in relation to that, I think also, like, just from what you're explaining, if the opposition, if he was replaced by such an opposition like that supported like small government and stuff like that, that's very promising news for the likes of Hong Kong. Very promising news.
I would say let's wait and see first.
Yeah.
You understand? They can brief a lot of people. You don't understand what I mean? I reached a point that I would say, okay. You understand what I mean? I do not want.
No building hopes up.
Yes, exactly. You know, I said that. Okay.
It's the same. It was the same thing where a lot of folk had their hopes up relative to, you know, what. I know it can be controversial me saying this, right? But a lot of people had their hopes up relative to the likes of Donald Trump, or it was the same way here in Britain with, you know, Boris Johnson and stuff like that, etc. Don't get me wrong, Trump, at least in the United States, did, you know, some good stuff that was positive and maybe like lowering the tax rates and deregulation to some extent, but he wasn't, you know, what people made him out to be. All he did was he reallocated spending from one area of the economy to another area of the economy, and I pointed out to folk, well, you know, when people use the term inflation, they confuse it with restricting productivity. So people were blaming, you know, Joe Biden specifically for the current inflation when it's not. The inflation's been long gone. You know, the lockdowns happened even under Trump, and you saw the furloughs and stuff like that, and therefore inflation soared. But what Biden was wrong for closing down the pipelines, creating a problem relative to the productive output, restricting productive output, that created a very problem, especially you see that, you know, now with the petrol prices and all sorts.
Oh, of course, no question about that,
you know, all
they create this mess.
Yeah, all Biden did was basically the country's already on fire, and all he's done is taken a petrol can and flung the petrol can in it. That's his way of solving a problem. But
of course, and this will actually stop Russia's attack at first place, because they drive the petrol price down. You understand what I mean? So they don't have them. They have to kind of accumulate so much money that quickly. You understand what I mean?
Yeah. So it's one of these things that I do, you know, more than understand. I think it's just one of these things that it sounds promising, and we could only hope that if Xi was removed, that you do end up with someone who would still.
And his successor is really claiming is walk and talk. Let's put it this way.
Well, it's a good thing, at least. You would kind of hope that you would make those changes that would, you know, at least free up compared to where, you know, Xi would kind of want China to go on. You know what I mean?
Well, Xi basically is want to make China become next North Korea. Let's face it.
And Based Libertarian went on to say, when the Great Recession happens, which side would do worse, East or West? What do you think about that, Mike?
Difficult question. First of all, now you might probably see that what I was saying coming. It depends on whether she is ousted or not. First of all, that's a two different story. For the sake of argument, let's assuming that she is ousted, and his successor did deliver what he promised to do. I believe the situation is that the initial bounce west will be faster, but the growth afterwards east will be faster. If you understand what I mean, because here's the thing, the bailout means that the pain to go through the process will be shorter in that sense, okay? but it will be prolonged because you do not allow to reset. You understand what I mean?
It's interesting you say that, because just quickly at the same time,
yep.
as Peter Schiff had went and quoted saying, he says every time the economy enters a recession, it takes a larger dose of monetary stimulus to get it out. That's because the stimulus prevents real solutions from taking place and sows the seeds of a worse recession to come. The recession will now require a fatal overdose of stimulus, and just like you're saying with the bailouts, that's all we've been continuously seeing. It's basically kicking the can down the road.
Yes, so that's why I said that, it depends on how you define, worse, understand what I mean. I do not want to give you the classic academic example on this, because I do not know. All I can say is lay down a scenario to say that if the free market, the limited government is delivered in a PRC, what happened is that the recession on the West will be relatively quicker to get it out, but the growth will be limited. But the PRC's growth will be faster.
Yeah.
But it's a reset. But it's painful, by the way. It will be painful. It will be painful. It won't be easy. And if the PRC want to push for a German economic miracle, they need to go for a reset on economy at a sound money. Very important.
Completely agree.
One of the reasons that why the Western Germany is successful is these two reasons. They have a sound mark. It's very, very important on this matter. And if they are not, they are definitely finished. Just like Russia. That's why previously some of the people I recalled that I said that I might probably do a debunk video on this matter, but I still don't have time yet. It's because Russia's so-called shock therapy is not successful because they didn't know that, which that professor mentioned. Russia have printed 1/3 of the money supply within half a year.
So I'll quickly go through just some of these other comments.
Sure.
It just says, I don't know much about Chinese politics, but the previous leader, Hu Jintao, seemed to strengthen China economically. I don't know where they went wrong. The housing bubble issues seem extreme.
I will just quickly answer this question first of all. Hu Jintao, he is a relatively moderate guy in that sense, because what happened is that the housing bubble is, I wouldn't want to say it, but he's basically kind of created that because he allowed the housing market to be. I wouldn't say he created that. He allowed the housing market to deregulate. He deregulated the housing market. I wouldn't say this is a bubble being created by him. I want to say that because you deregulate something, it will go up, right? But the question is that speculation will come in. But the question is that you have speculation coming in that when you have allowed to reset, this should not be a problem. But the problem is that because when the 2008 financial crisis come in, the PRC used a huge amount of stimulants to come in. Government spending, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, to stimulate things. That means that it has been overheated again in that sense. You have a deregulated market plus a gigantic over stimulants. You know what this is, a recipe of bubbles.
Well, the whole thing, I mean, obviously the deregulation is one thing that would help in terms of the growth, in terms of, house building and stuff like that. But as soon as you mentioned about that to do with the stimulus and government spending, that's essentially what creates the very, inflation stuff and the bubbles and what have you. It's just government's, oversight of all that sort of stuff. As Trex Master goes on to say, in response to this, she says, Xi's faction rose to power because Jiang Zemin faction have failed to secure tech and assistant transfers. At the moment, they knew they would regress, and then he says, whenever technology and assistance transfers are blocked, the targeted country realigns its internal affairs to reactive stance, usually soft, bellicose. And the last comment was interesting. I don't know much about it. I need to look into it more. Thanks. So yeah, I mean, it's been interesting.
Just a quick answer. The reason that why Zhe Mingjiang and basically the Shanghai gang is backing Xi is because not many people should notice that because Zheminjiang and Shanghai again thought that Xi is easy to be manipulated. So that's why he backed him at the first place. Not many people should notice that Xi is not having a firm grip of technology industry. In fact, he tried to have a firm grip of technology industry, but he failed. I mean, the fact that Jack Ma has always been rumored to be arrested, but later somehow a miracle they come out to say, "Hey, hello, I am alive," you know?
Aye, pretend sort of like disappearance.
Yes, and this is the best example to prove that the Shanghai can have a very firm grip on this matter. And this is also one of the reasons why she's always trying to clamp down on the technology side, because they know he can't get in on it. So the only way is to cut it. And that's why I mean more regulations on that, you know. And that is exactly the point they're trying to raise. So and that's why, you know, Zheminjiang originally backed the Xi. It's because he thought he's easily to be manipulated, which turned out to be not the case. You know, he's very good at acting in that sense. Probably deserved to win the Best Actor from Oscar.
Yep, that's obviously the main stuff covered, and obviously the questions had been answered. Is there anything you would like to add in, Mike?
Just to say a few more things. First of all, we have to watch out what exactly is happening, because the tentative contract is coming in this autumn. We do not know when exactly the date. We usually only know that 2 to 3 weeks in advance, so we do not know when exactly it is. The fight will continue, that's for sure. I mean, even though after tentative contracts will continue to until 2023, the spring, until the national paper order has been called on. And however, in extreme situation, we will not be surprised to see that she might be accused of in serious sickness, so he's out of power, shall we say in this way, you know, the usual suspect, the usual approach. And we just have to be pay attention to this. Obviously, some other indicators we might have to pay attention to that potentially she is keep losing the power is, for example, currently they're using the tier 1 management system in terms of running the manage the COVID situation with despite the tier 2 disease, which is not very spreadable. Be careful. Pay attention to whether they're going to move this down, because my understanding is that based on what was rumor suggested, that the Prime Minister Lee are desperately trying to move that to the tier 2 control methods, because that will means that they will not have to conduct any lockdowns anymore. If so, that will be a huge win for the NDC side. And we will have to pay attention to what exactly it is. But we know that currently there is one final thing. There is an ongoing investigation by the NTC side to saying that there is some of the testing companies are deliberately spreading the virus, like to create these things to keep on the money never stop. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Spreading the virus, and the investigation under now. And Prime Minister Lee already said that he will investigate, also stop funding all the testings, and he will going to have to retrospectively investigate whether all this funding or for testing is accurate from the 2010 spring. That means that it's beginning of the pandemic. If there's a few things that really get into the place for NDC size, basically the living together economy first policies, if they get to take the win, we can almost say that she's confidence has been nailed.
Yeah, I can see obviously he's, like you said earlier, losing support. That'll be quite interesting to see what comes, and if any further updates, then certainly let us know.
Sure, definitely. I would try, if I have the time, I would definitely give you guys an update, and no question about it. Once again, I'm not saying my clear that Scott never de-bluff on me. It's I don't have the time to pop him up really, So I'm always enjoy that, and I really appreciate and thanks Scott on this matter.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all, and it's always a pleasure. So obviously, that's pretty much everything that we wanted to get across, and thank you guys for obviously all your own questions and comments and stuff like that. I don't know, I've just quickly checked, obviously, because I always get the Facebook as well, but I don't know, nonetheless. So I just thought I would obviously get that's all the questions and stuff covered, and no doubt I'll get around to doing some videos which I've obviously been planning to get done, so get more videos out for you guys. Obviously I knew that I had this live stream coming, so it was just something that just got organised recently. So yeah, I mean, thank you for obviously all your comments, and thank you for watching, and obviously I shall talk to you guys later. Righty, cheers.